Welcome down to my 9-foot homemade oak bar. Pour yourself a cold one. You are listening to Bucs in the Basement. My name's Chris, and Craig here is the biggest Pirates fan you'll ever meet. Let's talk Pirates baseball now. Welcome to Bucs in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no more lies. We'll never know.
This week on Bucs in the Basement, things are going to look and sound just a little bit different. For one, Chris and I could not get our availability to match up for this week with the holiday weekend, the end of school, being in the middle of my son's Little League playoffs. Things just didn't match up, and that might sound a little bit similar to some of you because of the availability issues that get harped on in the bullpen. For people that think this is MLB The Show, and relievers can go every day if they're hot and can sit for weeks at a time if they're cold. But I digress. The other piece is that this is coming to you on a Friday morning. I'm recording this on the off day as the Pirates travel from Detroit up to Toronto. So that's the other piece of this, and that had to do with the fact that with the minor league baseball schedule, they get off days every Monday. And if I'm going to interview the broadcasters, the guys that I love to interview the most, it's going to be a lot easier if I do that on their off day and not when they're either on the road or planning the broadcast, studying the other team's statistics. It's just going to make it a little bit easier. So we'll see how this works out. But as I said, you will get to hear a lot of me, and I thought this would be a good time as May comes to an end to discuss some of the positives and negatives, the ups and downs thus far in the Pirates season. As it stands right now, the record is fairly close to 500, so even though there's been some ups and downs, it's evened itself out a little bit. You've had the offense performing well, and then the bullpen not performing very well, and then the bullpen performing not so great, the offense coming on. It just has been like an absolute little bit roller coaster of a season. And so we're just going to walk through some of these things. And in my field of work, I come from the crisis, social work, therapy background. When we're writing a report, we always start with the positives. So going through some of these positives, a lot of them in some ways have been surprises. Number one on this list has been Bailey Falter. I was sitting at my friend's 45th, we're getting old here, 45th birthday party not too long ago, and somebody asked me who I thought had the chance to be the most consistent pitcher in the Pirates rotation. And I kind of worked my way into thinking it could be Bailey Falter. I know that seems kind of crazy, and it's for a reason that maybe doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The piece of this that gets to me is that every left-handed pitching acquisition, or the majority of them, that Ben Cherington has brought in, a Tyler Anderson, a Jose Quintana, I mean, even a Rich Hill, it seems like that they have gotten either that person to turn their career trajectory around, get them back on track, or get the most out of them. In Rich Hill's case, so I saw like Bailey falter for some reason. Oscar Marine has this thing with left-handed starters that he kind of seems that he can get the most out of them. So Bailey falter through 10 games started at this point in time, 58 and a third innings pitched, a 3.55 ERA, and a 0.977 whip. That is numbers, especially the last one that Chris and I pay attention to the most, the whip, that would be in the high end part of your rotation, a 1 or a 2, bordering on ace type stuff. Obviously, you know, the control and the command and the extension that Bailey Falter uses is very key in this. If that drops off even, you know, just a little bit, you could see his numbers fall off. But as I pointed out previously during a previous episode, is when he got a little bit of a run a couple years ago with the Philadelphia Phillies, his whip was like a 1.274, somewhere around there, I believe. And so even that is like a 3-4, or if that's your 5, I mean, you're looking at a pretty good rotation if that's the guy that's like your 4 or your 5. Number 2, my favorite player on this team currently has been for the past couple seasons, Connor Joe, and he's been doing stuff that, I mean, he did for a portion of the year last year, has done it even better this year, has been called upon to kind of be the starting first baseman over there with the struggles of another player that we will get to later on in this episode. But Connor Joe, through almost 200 plate appearances, 196 plate appearances, slashing 286, 357, 463, good for a 136 OPS plus. The 100 is the average, so he's 36% better than the average major leaguer in OPS. 6 home runs. Number 3, Mitch Keller. Through April, Mitch Keller pitched 40 innings, started 7 games, a 5.18 ERA, and a 1.48 whip, 39 Ks. And we had some people out there in the Pirates media, not the social media, but the media, you know, kind of saying that his contract wasn't worth it and it wasn't a bargain and different stuff that Chris and I talked about as well. Through the month of May here up to this point, 27 and 2/3 inning, 4-game start, a 1.30 ERA, and an elite 0.90 whip. The one thing I will say is he is getting a lot more contact, not as much of the strikeout. You're seeing that on him being able to go a complete game. A lot of times the guys that are the strikeout specialists have to, I wouldn't say waste their pitches, but believe me, it takes a lot more to get a player to strike out than maybe ground into a double play or just simply ground out or fly out on a first pitch or, you know, an 0-1 or an 0-2 or a 2-1, whatever it may be. But it can take a little bit more to get through that. Andrew McCutchen, I think this is probably the part of the program where I should say, should never doubt you, man. I wanted to DFA you, maybe have you ride off into the sunset. Have been a catalyst in the surge of the offense that has happened recently. Andrew McCutchen, who is a notoriously slow starter, through April was slashing 190, 304, 329, and that OPS plus was sitting at 82. 3 home runs, striking out 32.6% of the time. Since then, in the month of May, slashing 273, 366, 844, a 142 OPS plus, 5 home runs, and a 20.8% K rate. Just has been absolutely great. Putting him in the leadoff spot has been, where he's found a little bit of this as well. Still, I would like to see him play in the field a little bit more, but if this is the production that you're going to get from your DH, I can't really complain about that whatsoever. Number 5, Colin Holderman, 17.1 innings pitched. As everybody probably remembers, Colin came down with the Bradenton flu, lost like 3/4 of his body weight, it seems like. He lost like 15, 20 pounds in a matter of a week or so with that. Had to build himself back up. Since he's come back, he has been absolutely brilliant. A 0.52 ERA, an elite 0.981 whip, 24 Ks, has been pretty much the biggest bright spot in the bullpen so far. And then Hunter Stratton, and a lot of people will look at Hunter Stratton's ERA, and you'll see the 4.97 ERA for a reliever. As you know, Chris and I always go to the whip. The moment of this recording, across 25 1/3 inning, we have the 1.066 whip. Also, if you want to look at him maybe getting a little bit unlucky with the fielding, go to the fielding independent pitching. It's just basically everything that he can control, from the strikeouts, the walks, the hits, and even the home runs. It's the stuff that he doesn't have to rely on a fielder. So take out the hits, but it's everything that he can control. A 3.13 FIP. And for right now, that's kind of the positives. There are some other players that could kind of go into that. I know that everybody would want me to mention Nicky G, Jared Jones, Paul Skeens, and I will get into one of those a little bit later on, but I kind of want to see, Gonzalez's sample size get a little bit bigger. I do want to see Jared Jones and how he reacts coming off of, his worst outing, didn't have his best stop as far as velocity and command. Paul Skeens, it just hasn't been up long enough. So just kind of want to see how those guys progress before listing them as a positive for this team so far. On to a little bit of the negatives. And a couple weeks ago, Chris and I did an episode, I think it was called Low-Hanging Fruit Fodder. And this is really the low-hanging fruit of the guys who haven't performed well thus far this season. Everybody's favorite, Rowdy Tellez, across 138 plate appearances, slashing 175, 239, 222, 1 home run, 4 total extra base hits. And as everybody knows, the biggest thing here with Rowdy has been his lack of power. And not that you really want to deal with having that 175 average. You could have a Kyle Schwarber with a 190 average to like 200 and still be able to deal with it. You want to see that a little bit higher. You want to see the on base up a little bit. But the biggest thing has been the power, and you can look straight towards the ISO, and that's the isolated slugging It's basically it's measuring the power. Go on to Fangraphs and look this up. This year, Rowdy Tellez, his ISO is sitting at .048, and that's not 0.48. That's .048. Last year, even though he struggled a decent amount, he got off to that hot start, but did struggle for the rest of the season. His ISO was still .610. In the 2022 outlier season, the 35 home run season, you saw that at .242. And back in 2021 was another one of those not so great years, but obviously a lot better than he has been so far this season. That was at .172. So this is, if .242 is an outlier, .048 is also an outlier. Just not so sure how long he's going to get that leash to be able to try to figure these things out. When I had Charlie Franzen from the Bucco Fever podcast on, we both kind of agreed that you're maybe looking at, I was thinking at the end of May. I know that Andrew Destin from the Post-Gazette just went on 93.7 The Fan because I saw it retweeted out and said that's a possibility that you could be looking towards July. We'll dig into that a little bit deeper here as we talk about players that could possibly come up. The spark plugs outside of Andrew McCutchen that have been provided to this team. But the next guy, somebody that Chris and I didn't want to call a fourth outfielder, didn't really want to discuss him possibly going down to AAA, but we did, and that's Jack Suwinski. Jack Suwinski, 157 plate appearances, slashing 174, 268, 297, 4 home runs. This guy's been a complete enigma so far this season, and it's to the point that basically, you're looking at his K rate this season, and the K rate has been like 25.5%, walking over 11.5%, and that's what you would be kind of looking for, a guy that's like, oh man, he's really making some improvements. But once again, the same with as it was with Rowdy Tellez, you're looking at a dip in that ISO. He is not as far down as Rowdy has been, but he is basically, cut in half what he did during the previous 2 seasons. The ISO sitting at 123 this year. In 2023, when we saw his power really come out, he was at a 250. And then the season before, where he was up and down, even more. We know there's those peaks and valleys with Jack Suwinski, but we really saw he ended up getting sent down to AAA during that season in 2022. We saw it at 230. So, he's back down in AAA again, looking like there is a new stance again. It kind of seems like Jack Suwinski goes through new stances a lot. He had a new stance that he was working through at the beginning of last year in 2023. So I don't know what the ceiling is for Jack Suwinski. I called him a fourth outfielder. At the moment, that's probably the best you can hope for this season. If he exceeds that, great. But if I'm going to be reasonable with my expectations, I'd be looking at a fourth outfielder as the ceiling for the 2024 season. And then finally, Chris's favorite player, maybe second favorite player, I'm not really sure, because he doesn't like Yasmani Grandal either. I'm going to go with Aroldis Chapman. Aroldis Chapman, 18.1 innings pitched so far this season. He's got the 4.91 ERA. Talking about, Hunter Stratton earlier with the 4.97 ERA. But Aroldis Chapman has a 1.855 whip. Look at the fielding, independent pitching, all the stuff that Aroldis Chapman can control. That bumps up to 580. So basically you're thinking is this guy getting, he's actually maybe getting lucky, which would be terrible to think about, because if he's getting lucky and it's looking as bad as it does, I mean, how much worse could this get? The one thing he does is he still strikes people out. Across those just over 18 innings, he has 33 Ks, but he also has 21 walks. Towards the second half of last season, once he was traded to the Rangers, saw an absolute dip in his production. I mean, we've seen the ups and downs of Aroldis Chapman. He's been a pretty volatile reliever throughout his career, but I mean, as players get older, you're kind of looking for that part where they actually finally, drop off the cliff. I mean, could this be Aroldis Chapman's cliff? And this is where I kind of want to get into something that Chris and myself have brought up a bunch of times. I've seen it growing, its momentum throughout, Pirates social media, as well as, Pirates official media, flagship station, all that kind of good stuff, is, the recent woes of the bullpen, and then going into how much was spent on the bullpen. Chris, kind of pointed out that I think the Rangers spent around $14 million on their bullpen, their entire bullpen last year. Wasn't one of the best bullpens in baseball, but was good enough, could spend money. I mean, they spent an exorbitant amount of money. So I'll get into some teams that spend, as far as their overall payroll, a similar amount to the Pirates, and how much they've spent on their bullpens and what the production of that has been. But I'm going to go to the recent woes of the bullpen and step back to last year in 2023. The Pirates overall had the 11th best bullpen in baseball, and this is for the entire season. And I can remember back to this because I keep bringing it up. Like Chris and I say, like, the bullpen is the last thing you should finish in your build, in your rebuild. And last year, everybody was saying, oh, this bullpen's so great. And they did finish in the top half. But through April, I mean, they were a pretty good bullpen. They had a 1.28 whip, which was 17th, but it was really like maybe like a few like points. I'm talking like if you went down to like 1.25, they would be in the top 10 in baseball. Their ERA was 3.10, which was 7th. And something that I've been looking at a lot more is the left on base percentage. It was 77.1, and that was good for 4th in all of Major League Baseball. Then in May through June, we saw everything just completely fall off the map. The whip, 1.49, 27th in MLB. The ERA, 5.08, 28th in MLB. The left on base percentage, 68.1%, 26th in MLB. And then when the team started to like win again, the bullpen started to pick it back up again. July through September, I guess October, Bucktober, they had a 1.25 whip, 8th in Major League Baseball, a 4.15 ERA, and that was 14th. They didn't do great with the left on base, and that was it right at 69%, and that was good for 22nd in Major League Baseball. This year, we were talking about how the bullpen was doing pretty well at the beginning of the season. It was the bullpen and the starting rotation that was keeping them in games, and it was the offense that was kind of failing them, especially for about a 2-week stretch at one point in time. Through April of this season, a 1.24 whip, and that's 18th. And it's kind of like last year as well, that if they were just a tiny bit better, they would come into that top half and be threatening for like a top 10 in that category. And then you look at the ERA. It's a 4.08, good for 18th. The left on base, not great, 68.5%, good for 20th. And then you come to May. A 1.55 whip, 27th in Major League Baseball. The 5.49 ERA, 28th. The left on base, 62.6, 28th. So once again, like, we're going to have to see how June turns out, but it seems like the bullpen production performance is very similar to what we saw, last season. So, I mean, maybe some diamonds in the rough can be found, like a Ryan Baracki, on the waiver wire. Somebody could, come up and be a fireman, like Dowry Moretta could be at times last season. But before I move on to the last segment of the podcast, I did want to talk about how much each team spends on the bullpens and kind of where they fall in the bullpen rankings. And this is like the overall rankings. And this is just some food for thought for everybody. Because, I mean, there's been teams like the Chicago White Sox who went out and got like Kendall Graveman and Joe Kelly. And they had Liam Hendricks. And they had so much of their money going towards the bullpen. And we saw how that worked out for them. But I'm going to take a look at the first six, like the top six bullpens from 2023. And number 1 and number 3 can kind of be crossed out for me just because these teams spend on a different level from the Pirates. So it's not really something that I think is very comparable. So let's start with number 2, and that's the Baltimore Orioles bullpen in 2023. Second best bullpen. They spent $7.15 million. The fourth best bullpen, the Miami Marlins, spent $17.3 million. The Cincinnati Reds, who were at number 5, spent $8.8 million. The Seattle Mariners, who rounded out 6th there, $7.8 million. The Pirates last year, when they were the 11th ranked bullpen overall in Major League Baseball, and these are like all estimates. I really should have taken the time to call up Ethan Houlihan, have him come on. I apologize, Ethan. I will do that at some point in time. But as I said before, my availability this week has not been great. The Pirates spent $4.4 million on their bullpen and were the 11th ranked bullpen in Major League Baseball. Now let's look at 2024. The number 1 bullpen in Major League Baseball at this moment is the Cleveland Guardians. The Cleveland Guardians have spent $15.5 million, which is more on the higher end. So that kind of goes into, the Miami Marlins type of thing from last season. Cross out number 2, that's Boston. Cross out number 3, Phillies always have a good bullpen, and they're at number 3. Oakland has the 4th best bullpen in Major League Baseball, spending around $8.3 million. Cincinnati in the top 5 again, only $11 million estimated on their bullpen. The Pirates, at this point in time, they are sitting at, get this, guys, they are the 20th best bullpen because they were pretty good at the beginning, absolutely awful, but the 20th best bullpen. They've spent $18 million estimated on their bullpen at this point in time. And that's kind of where the whole Aroldis Chapman thing comes in, is that if you spend that $10.5 million and it doesn't work out, it just kind of starts to look like a void. It kind of starts to look like a mistake. And unless things start to turn around really quickly for Chapman, it's going to be one of the biggest mistakes that Ben Cherington's made so far as general manager of your Pittsburgh Pirates. Are you a fan of the Pittsburgh Pirates and supporting small businesses? If so, Bucs in the Basement has you covered. Introducing the Bucs in the Basement Vouch Store, with products from places like Split Rock Coffee, coffee with a purpose, established, owned, and operated by disabled veterans, sworn to protect America, or Camp Craft Cocktails, more than cocktails. It's a mission to build longer tables where everyone is welcome. We try and vouch for these products. Bucs in the Basement, proudly brought to you by Vouch. Visit our Vouch store at bucksinthebasement.com or simply click on the link in the show notes. Earlier in this episode, I talked about mine and Charlie Franson's opinions on Rowdy Tellez. Also mentioned what Andrew Destin from the Post-Gazette had said. I was really starting to think about this one, and it kind of is like 3 to 4 guys, and it's like what to do, and it's a trio of Triolo, Taylor, and Tellez, the 3 T's. And then you have Alika Williams. And I looked at this and thought to myself, I'm like, we haven't been seeing Rowdy, we haven't been seeing Alika, and we haven't been seeing Taylor as much. Rowdy Tellez has 19 plate appearances over the past 2 weeks as the offense has started to surge. Alika Williams has 68 plate appearances on the entire season, 14 over the past 2 weeks. Michael A. Taylor does have 137 plate appearances on the season, but only 24 plate appearances over the past 2 weeks. For reference, guys that you see as regular starters and that are regular starters for the Pirates, Brian Reynolds and Connor Joe both have 58 plate appearances over the past 2 weeks. As of the date of this recording, this is through the doubleheader in Detroit. So you have like guys that are getting half or less than half of the plate appearances of a regular player. They are a 4th outfielder. They are bench pieces. So yes, I mean, you could say that they're taking up a roster spot, but I mean, at least in Triolo with Brian Hayes hopefully back and hopefully healthy, I mean, you're seeing guys that are going to be bench pieces. And that's like if Nicky G, and hopefully, when Nicky G continues to hit very well. But you look at, Triolo and you look at Taylor. I'd already looked at, Rowdy Tellez's numbers for the year. I don't even think it's worth looking at the offensive production from Alika Williams because he gets so few plate appearances. But Jared Triolo, in just over 200 plate appearances, 202, slashing 205, 287, 273 with a 64 OPS plus, 3 home runs. And this is where like things get a little bit like tricky, is that his B WAR is a solid 1. His F WAR is a legitimate quad A player at 0.0. Michael A. Taylor, as I mentioned, has 137 plate appearances, not that many recently. 203, 252, 260, a 49 OPS plus. He's got that 1 home run. He is a 0.3 F WAR, a 0.5 B WAR. So basically you're looking at bench pieces at this point in time. And I looked at like who is going to replace them? Who's going to replace Triolo? Who's going to replace Taylor? Who's going to replace Tellez? Who's going to replace Alika? And the like 2 names I'm hearing a lot more now are Liover Peguero. I don't know what to make of Liover Peguero. He's got a little over 200 plate appearances, so flip-flop him and Triolo. And his AAA numbers are, I mean, they're solid, but they're not great. Slashing, 276, 343, 397, a 740 OPS, 2 home runs, 11 doubles, 2 triples. But we're looking at Ji-Hwan Bae, who at this point in time looks like the replacement call-up for Jack Sawinski, even though it didn't happen at the exact same day, at the exact same time. It was close enough that it kind of seems like that G1 Bay has kind of become that replacement for Jack Sawinski. But, I mean, in May, he's got 100 plate appearances, slashing 247, 360, 333. That's a 693 OPS, 1 home run, 4 doubles, 0 triples. So he's actually been performing worse as of late. And even if he did come up here, he's not the defensive specialist that, Alika Williams is, who's not even playing that much. He doesn't provide the defensive flexibility that, Jared Triolo provides. I mean, I guess you could say, okay, we'll flip-flop him and Triolo and see if we can get him going like they did at the end of last season, where they, kind of like he wasn't performing great when he first came up, send him back down, told him some stuff to work on. And that's when, Triolo came back up. And even though it was, BABIP, I guess, helped that, he did perform a lot better, after he was called back up. So, I mean, I guess you could do that, but I don't see him getting the plate appearances that, Triolo was getting so far, because without the Ke'Bryan Hayes injury, I don't see Triolo getting that many plate appearances. If Nicky G continues to perform, don't see him getting that many plate appearances. And then the other one is Matt Gorski, who has been on fire during the month of May. He's hit 8 of his 9 home runs across 147 plate appearances on the season. He's got 271, 308, 594. But I did mention this. I believe this was on the most recent episode of Minor League News and Brews. 45 Ks to 9 walks is just striking out, an exorbitant amount. So I don't know how that would translate. I mean, obviously you want some power in the lineup. Gorski mostly plays like a pretty good center field, right field, has been known to play some first base. And he has been, hitting well if you want to play him some first base, both against right-handed pitchers and left-handed pitchers this season. Obviously better as a right-handed hitter against left-handed pitching, a 929 OPS. And then against right-handed pitchers, he's hitting 849 OPS. So fairly even. I mean, I guess you could go with that. And I know I said I wouldn't talk about small sample sizes, but I did want to get to some stuff that's going to be a little bit longer again. When Chris isn't around, I guess I have a hard time adhering to the 30 minutes of Bucs. I'm sorry, Chris. But it's the one thing I've really noticed about Nick Gonzalez, and this is something that myself and Jack McMullen, from Just Baseball Media, one of the voices of the Indianapolis Indians, talked about when we did a little bit of a Paul Skeens special when he was being called up. Got to talk about the adjustments that Nick Gonzalez has made as well. And it's kind of showing in this time that he's been, up in the major leagues. Nick Gonzalez is a little bit more of a pull hitter, always has been a pull hitter, but we've seen a little bit more, an uptick of 4% in his opposite field hitting that he's shown. I know it's not much of a dip, but it's something that it kind of seems like that he's actually working on to a degree. The other thing that I would see is that, last year when he was up with the Pirates, his ground ball rate was 58.5%. And astonishingly, so far, it's been 25%. The fly ball rate has jumped by 12%. The line drive rate has jumped by 20%. So it's just the way he's hitting the ball. He's always been a good four-seam fastball hitter. The run value, according to StatCast, on the four-seamer last year is 4. This year it's 5. But the one thing you will definitely see is last year on the sinker it was -4. This year it's 2. Last year on the changeup it was -3. Now it's 1. He is definitely hitting, those off-speed pitches, the curveballs, everything like that, doing a lot better. The curveball this year is a 2. Last year, it was a -1. So those are some things to look about what's going on with Nick Gonzalez. As I said, the minor league news and brews is not going to come out Saturday as normal. Probably be out either Monday afternoon if I can get the editing done, or definitely Tuesday morning. Going to be bringing back Thomas Zinzarella. He is the voice of the Bradenton Marauders. Going to maybe work my way back up through the system, but I told him I'd have him back on once he got himself a little bit acclimated to the job. So looking forward to that. But until next time, guys, let's go.
Hip, hip. Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing.